So basically, just making this video, had an interesting encounter about a year ago that I thought would have ended then, and it's been ongoing, and it just doesn't seem to stop. And so I just kind of wanted to document things from the beginning to where I'm at now, just so that way it's out there. Over time you tend to forget things, whatever. So to the best of my ability, I'm going to go through everything that has happened during all of this. So
what was the date this all began?
The specific date,
Or just ballpark?
it was in January. It was like the 17th or 18th. I have it documented elsewhere, but the computer that's documented on isn't up and running right now, so I couldn't get the exact specifics. But I mean, most of the details I still remember. It's just specific facts like numbers and stuff. So
about January 2017.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess one thing, maybe a little bit earlier, because there's a text conversation that happened January 20th.
Okay.
And that was possibly 2 weeks after or so. So
right at the beginning of the year.
Right about a year ago.
Okay.
So what happened, starting out, about a year ago, I was heading home, and I'm driving in my car. I get to a red light. I stop. There's a vehicle in front of me. I'm sitting there, just doing the normal thing. Over on like the right-hand side, like on the sidewalk, I see this person that looked like they were either intoxicated or they were slipping on ice.
Pedestrian?
Yeah, they were walking, and they looked like they were having some trouble.
Mm-hmm.
There was some snow and stuff earlier. The roads were fine, but the sidewalks still had. So I'm like, well, maybe something's wrong with them.
Right.
As I'm noticing them, the vehicle in front of me puts their vehicle into reverse. So I just assume they're trying to give that person some space because they seem to be having trouble walking. Understandable. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting there, and then next thing I know, they just back up straight into my car. I let out an expletive, and then, it's just one of those where you're just like, how does that even happen?
Sure.
Like, why would somebody do that? Whatever. Accidents happen. So I'm running through my head, what's the procedure on stuff like this? So since it's an accident and everything, main thing you got to do is report it. So I pull my phone out of my pocket. I call the Grand Junction dispatch, and I let them know, hey, I was at a red light, got backed into, just letting you guys know it. I need to report it and everything. And they told me that they were busy, but they would send someone out as soon as they could. While I'm on the phone talking to them, the person that backed into me had gotten out of their car. They were looking at it, and they motioned to move up and turn to the next street over, because we were on 28 and a quarter, which is kind of a busy-ish street, and so we turned onto a side road. So I was like, oh, good idea. So we move over. I finish the phone call with dispatch, get off the phone with them. At this point, I'm out of the car, and me and the other gentleman are looking at the damage. So I had a 90s Toyota RAV4 that I was driving. He was in a Land Cruiser. And so we're looking. There doesn't seem to be much, if any, damage on his vehicle. And the only thing that I really noticed on mine was I think it was the passenger side turning signal. Just the cover was smashed. And in the front part, like right below the bumper, there's like a little plastic thing, and that was cracked in the center.
Okay.
So we're talking, and I asked him, I'm like, well, why would you back up at a red light? Like, what compels you to do that? And I didn't really understand what he said. He stated something about GPS. The only thing that I can rationalize from what I heard, which again, this is just my opinion. I don't know for sure if any of this is accurate or not, but on especially like older GPS units, you start them up and they won't give you the direction that you're facing.
Right.
They just say, here's where you are, and if you're trying to get directions, you kind of need to know which way you're going. Otherwise, they're saying, go this way, and you start going that way, and it's the wrong way. So the only thing I could figure is he just turned his GPS on and figured if he backed up a few feet and then moved forward, it would orientate itself to give him directions.
Okay.
That's neither here nor there. I'm just
Conjecture.
trying to make sense of what I was told.
Right.
So, he asked me what I wanted to do, and so I'm just thinking just standard procedure, and I'm like, well, we should probably exchange information, because I'm no expert on getting into an accident, but from what I can recall, 2 things you need to do is exchange information and make sure you report it.
Right.
So it's just making sure my bases were covered. Well, when I said that, he kind of hesitates a little bit, says he doesn't really want to get insurance involved, and he'd rather just pay for it.
Okay.
Which is fair.
Yeah.
I mean, you make an insurance claim, insurance rates go up, nobody likes that.
Exactly.
And so he said that he had some money that he could give me right now and just settle it then. So curiosity got me. I'm just like, well, what are we talking here? And he stated that he had something to the tune of like $80 or something like that. And I was like, well, hang on. I mean, right now, all that I can see that's damaged is this cover on my turning signal and then this crack on this plastic part. If that's it, like, that would maybe be like $5 to get a new cover. Mm-hmm. I don't think a crack in the plastic is going to cause much of an issue, so he'd be overpaying.
Right.
At the same token, there could be something internally that had been damaged. And then if I'm just like, oh yeah, we'll just call it good after that, and turns out like an engine was imploding slowly, then, that's no good either.
Sure.
So I was like, I think we should just exchange information. I'll take it to get looked at, and then, we can address things after that. So he pulls out a piece of paper and he writes down his name, his address, and his phone number.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
I wasn't thrilled about that, but I mean, again, with what I saw, I was just like, it's probably not going to be anything anyways. I'm probably not even going to fix it. Because, I mean, it was smashed, but still mostly covered. And it still appeared to be working just fine.
It's just kind of a cosmetic damage.
Yeah, and I mean, it was an older car. Small things like that, it's whatever. Mm-hmm. So, we'd kind of settled things. I was under an assumption that there was a chance he might not even have insurance, but I didn't know. I was like, maybe that's why I didn't give it to me. I don't know. So he gets in his car to leave, and I call the dispatch back. And I let him know, if you guys are busy, this was just a small fender bender. Like, we've already, exchanged information and everything. If you have actual, crimes being committed, deal with the important stuff.
Sure.
A small little accident isn't that big of a deal if you guys are really busy. And the dispatcher told me that they actually had an officer on the way, so I should wait for him. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, that's fair. Right as they're saying that, I see the officer pull over, and he pulls in behind me. So I get off the phone with the dispatcher, and then the officer comes out. I tell him what happened, why the guy had already left, because, I don't expect people to wait forever to report a small fender bender. So I gave the piece of paper with the guy's information to the officer. Mm-hmm. He called him up and asked him if he could just come back to give a statement, so that way he didn't have to track him down. Okay. The address was in Delta, okay. So it would have been difficult for a Grand Junction police officer to,
make the trek out there.
Right. And, side note, that there are times where sarcasm gets the better of me. He had, I believe they were Indiana license plates.
Okay.
And so I made a statement about it or something, it might have been when he wrote down his address. He stated that he just recently moved to Delta.
Okay.
And I couldn't help myself. I commented, well, I'm not sure how they do things in Indiana, but in Colorado, it's not commonplace to throw your vehicle in reverse at a red light. Just letting you know. I just had to throw that out there.
Small joke.
You're right. I mean, I'm going to be honest on all fronts on here. I didn't always approach things in the best way, but again, that's just how I deal with stuff. Is when I get angry, I try to make light of things.
Sure.
So, while we're waiting, I give my statement to the police officer. Tell him what happened on my side. He wrote everything down. He inspected the damage on my vehicle. Then the other gentleman came back, and so he went over to his vehicle to get his side of things. So I'm just sitting there leaning up against my car. I think I was texting my friend at the time, just kind of killing time, waiting until I could. I think I was going to be doing laundry that day, so I'm waiting so I can go to get laundry started or whatever.
Sure.
And the officer comes back over, and he says that I can take off because he has pretty sure he had everything that he needed from me. But he stated that he was having trouble getting information from the other driver.
Okay.
And so, like, it made me a little nervous. Like, the guy seemed to be acting a little weird, and I wasn't sure why. But, you know, he seemed confident with everything, and, you know, he said I was good, so I went home. Later that night, I got a phone call from the officer. He just had a few other just small follow-up questions to make sure that he had all of the details down. And then he told me to just be prepared because there was a chance that the other driver might take this to court. Because the only thing that the other driver would tell him was that it was going to come down to a matter of who hit who.
Okay.
So at this point, the only thing that I could think of was that there's an old episode of Chips. And in that episode, there was a guy who would go on off-ramps on the interstate, and then when cars would come down the ramp, he would throw his car in reverse and back into them.
Okay.
And then when the police would show up, he would tell them that he was just sitting there and they ran into him. And then he was doing, you know, insurance fraud that way.
Right.
Eventually they catch him because...
It's the episode.
Right. So that was a brief thought. Is he going to try to take this to court saying that I just didn't stop and I ran into him? But it was one of those, after a while you just dismiss it. And it's just like, no, you know, people aren't like that in real life. You hope.
You hope.
So a week or so passed by, and I'm driving down the street, and at this point I was just going to forget the whole thing. Everything seemed to be working just fine on my car, so if it was just that smash turning signal, I'm just going to let it go. Driving down the street, and I see a friend of mine walking on the side of the road, so I went to honk to get their attention so I could wave. And when I honked, my horn was kind of like a burr, burr. I was like, well, that's not a normal sound. Maybe I should get this looked at because my horn didn't do that before.
The accident.
Right. So I went to an auto shop to get it looked at. The mechanic opened up the hood. He's like, oh, yeah, I can see right here. And he showed me kind of where there was some damage that was done. He looked at everything that was damaged and quoted me $1,894 to fix everything that was damaged.
Right.
So I was like, oh, glad I didn't take $80 on that one, because if all this stuff is damaged, need to look into that. So I sent the guy a text letting him know, hey, I took my car to get looked at. Mechanic said it was this much. How do you want to proceed? He responded back a little while later stating that basically the feel of the conversation was that I was just making it up. Should I just read the conversation? Because I have it.
Yeah, might as well.
Sure. Okay. So this was January 20th. At 10:15, I sent.
This is the beginning of your one-on-one with.
Right. This is the first text message that I sent.
Okay.
His name's Craig. So I said, "Hey, Craig, this is Matthew. We had a little run-in last week, so I guess it was just a week earlier. Well, I finally had time to get my car looked at, and I do have bad news. Aside from the crack in the bumper and the smashed light, they discovered that the radiator support has been smashed, which also crushed the horn and the condenser. The estimate totaled up to fix my car was $1,894.20. So I wanted to see how you wanted to proceed from here." And again, I'm willing to work with him. Like, if he is still just wanting to pay out of pocket, but he's like, I don't know if I can come up with all of that, I'd probably settle. Again, it was an older car.
Right.
We'll just see what we can do. His response at 1:17 was, "I don't believe it. Just as I don't believe your 5 mile per hour or so impact could ever crack a bumper." This is in parentheses. "Bumpers don't crack unless they're cracked already. In my opinion, insofar as the bumper anyway, you're just shopping for free car parts, and any supposed further damage will require further examination. My insurance has assured me they will take it from here. I have already advised them that you're including previous existing damage in your estimate/claims. Have a really nice day." So that was his response. We had a slight back and forth after that on how him backing into me could have put damage into the vehicle. I could have swore that there was a hitch, or at least the connector for a hitch on the back of his vehicle, which adds a little protrusion.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, flat contact right there isn't going to do much inside, but if you have a little bit sticking out, that's where I see it. He states that his hitch was and is missing, and that the protrusion is maybe an inch from the bumper, but there's no damage to his bumper. So kind of strange that much damage happened to your vehicle with no damage to mine. That was a question. Just as it's kind of strange it took 2 weeks to notice. That was also a question. I responded, I initially assumed there was very minor damage. I meant, but I didn't write that in. Shortly thereafter, I discovered more was wrong. However, with work, I was unable to get it looked at professionally until today. And then he just said, "Call my insurance," gave me the insurance number and then the claim number. So I said, "Okie dokie."
Right.
So.
And at least so far, his concerns and skepticism isn't necessarily wholly unwarranted.
Right.
And you explained yourself afterwards.
I can see where people are coming from. So I called up his insurance company and I gave the claim number, and the guy was talking to me about what happened. He stated that it's Craig Brown. So Mr. Brown had already filed his side of the story, and he said, "I'm sure you already know that side." Mm-hmm. And I said, "No, actually, why don't you read that off to me?" So he read Mr. Brown's side of the story, and for the life of me, I can't remember what he said.
Okay.
But it was not close to what happened.
Not even remotely accurate.
It may have been remotely accurate, but there was a lot of things that just didn't make sense.
Okay.
And so he finished that, and I said, "Well, let me tell you what actually happened." Then I gave him the basic generalized version of what I just gave you, and his insurance agent, which is on his side because they want to pay as little money as possible.
Yeah.
They tend to try to
lean that way.
Right. He responded with, "That makes a lot more sense. Our client is 100% at fault. Take your car to the auto shop, get it fixed, and we will pay for the whole thing."
Wow.
And I said, "Hang on a second. I mean, yeah, that'd be great to just get it fixed and everything, but I wanted to make sure that we're doing everything the correct way." So I told his insurance company to send one of their guys down to look at my car. And then have them do an estimate, and then they could just cut a check for it, and we could do it that way. So they sent a guy down. He came in and looked at it, and I don't remember the exact number on that one, but when he looked at it, it was closer to like $700. So we're down like $1,100 from what the mechanic said. So I called him up just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And essentially what it comes down to is mechanics just look for what's wrong.
Okay.
So he saw everything that was wrong and gave me a quote on what it would be to fix all of that.
Not necessarily the vacuum of that accident itself.
Right. Or I think it was the condenser was the one thing that it was in the area of everything else that was damaged.
Right.
But the guy that looks at accidents professionally, when he looked at it, he didn't see that being part of the damage from the accident.
Okay.
He saw the other stuff that was mentioned, but not the condenser, and that was a more expensive part. So he was saying, he's been doing this a long time, and in his professional opinion, that wasn't part of it. So I said, okay, that's fine. So we settled there. That will probably come back because I don't think that amount ever got to Mr. Brown.
Okay.
I think he to this day still assumes that his insurance company gave me the $1,800 whatever.
Okay.
So just so that way, I want to try to give all sides as best
Be
to the best of my
transparent,
ability.
yeah.
I assume we're done at that point until I get a phone call. I get a phone call from the DA's office. I don't know the specifics on the person's title,
Okay.
but essentially, they handle all the court cases where it's the city of Grand Junction versus another individual. So
Okay.
they represent the city of Grand Junction, essentially.
All right.
So they call me up and say that Mr. Brown is fighting the ticket and that there was a court date set for June 20th. Most of the dates I don't remember the exact one. This one I do. We'll get into that in a minute. So it was June 20th at 3 o'clock was the first court date,
Okay.
which is already 6 months after the fact.
Yeah.
So this was the first day of my vacation because I was taking a vacation from the 20th through the 27th. And I wasn't planning on leaving town until after 5 anyways. Mm-hmm. And the courts are only open until 5. So I was like, that should be fine. I should be able to make it in. So the 20th rolls around. I had talked to the prosecuting attorney. I wish I could remember her title. I'm just going to refer to her as the DA.
Okay.
I do not believe she is the DA, but that's just what I'm going to refer to her as in future reference.
Sounds good.
I talked to her a little bit about, kind of what to expect and everything. And she did state that they had offered like a plea deal where essentially he could take like a driving course or something. It was basically he could take a class and they would just throw the ticket out. And he had refused that because he was taking it to court.
Okay.
So we go in, we're getting ready for the case and everything, but there was another case that had to be seen before ours.
Okay.
And so we're sitting there, and they basically said, we can get this one done quickly, we'll hear yours, if not, we'll have to reschedule. Well, the other one was taking a while, so after about an hour, they're like, we're not going to get this done in time, we're going to reschedule for a week from today at 3 o'clock. So now this is the last day of my vacation, I have to be at court also, which also happened to be my birthday.
Oh, man.
All of that is irrelevant to everything, but it was just kind of funny how it all fell. So on the plus side, I didn't have to ask off for work because I already did.
Nice.
So I go on vacation, and I had planned on being back in town before the 27th anyways. I just took that extra day off because it was my birthday and gave me another day to relax before I went back to work.
Sure.
So then the second court case comes.
Mm-hmm.
We go in, And before things get started, Mr. Brown addressed the judge, and he stated that he had talked to a lawyer within the week between the two cases. And I'm trying to remember the term that he used. This isn't the accurate term, but he essentially asked for like an extension or a continuance. There's a specific term for it, I can't remember. But he wanted to search for discovery information.
Okay.
So that was a new term for me at the time. So I'm like, what is this?
I was just about to ask, what is discovery information?
Well, during the conversation between him and the judge, you kind of get a little bit more of an idea. So the judge asks what information he's trying to discover. And he was wanting to look into the, I believe he referred to it as the 911 records. Because this isn't his exact wording, but essentially the way he made it sound is he felt if he got a hold of the 911 calls on that day, there would be a recording of me saying, hey, can you guys send my good buddy Officer Gonzalez over here to investigate this wreck? And that was, in his belief at the time, why he got the ticket, was because one of the things he did say was the officer and I were awfully chummy.
Okay.
Which, yeah, I mean, I try to get along with people, especially people that are there to help. And in situations like that where I didn't do anything wrong, I'm going to try to get along with somebody that's just there doing their job.
Sure.
So he also stated his suspicion of essentially me trying to commit insurance fraud. So the judge grants him I'm just going to call it a continuance. There was a specific term for it, and I keep forgetting that specific term. Anyways, they set the next court case for sometime in September. I think it was August or September.
Okay.
So a couple months later. So we come back. This is the third time being at court. We get there. Court starts. They're doing roll call. Mr. Brown is not there. So judge tells us we're free to go and issues a warrant. Because if you're fighting a ticket and you don't show up to court, automatic warrant out for your arrest.
Okay.
And again, at this point, I figure that must be the end of it. My assumption at the time was that he might have just moved back to like Indiana or something, and then it just wasn't worth his time to come back to Colorado for something like this. So I figured I'd never hear from it again. Well, a few days later, I get a phone call from the person I'm referring to as the DA, which, again, I just want to clarify, she is not. I'm pretty sure. And she said that Mr. Brown had posted his bond, and they did a quick turnaround, and they were going to do another court case in like 3 days. But I was not going to be in town on that day because I had a funeral that I was going to. So they ended up rescheduling for a month later.
Okay.
So now we're into November. So November rolls around. This is the fourth time I'm going to court for this.
This was just a couple months ago, right?
Yeah. And so I go in. Everybody shows up this time. So we actually get to go through the whole thing.
Okay.
So
It finally happens.
it's finally there. Now, they had a few people that just had real quick things to address. So the judge did their stuff first. And I kind of like watching how she did everything. The judge was very good about, she would tell everybody basically the things that they needed to know. You know, you have this option, or these are your choices right now. How do you want to proceed? Or this is what we're going to do. This is what I should do, but I'm going to be lenient. I'm going to do this instead. You know, just she was very good about taking people's personal situations into account and trying to be fair, which I can only imagine how difficult that is.
Right, yeah.
And so we go. It's finally our turn. Prosecution goes first. So that's us. So I go up. I give my statement on everything that happens. The person that I'm referring to as the DA, asks questions, I respond. Then they open it for cross-examinations. So Mr. Brown then gets to ask questions. He asked a few questions that a lot of them, the person I referred to as the DA was objecting to because she felt that they were irrelevant to the case at hand. One of the things that he tried to bring out, like he asked how far away from his vehicle I stopped at the red light. And I don't remember my exact words, but I estimated 5 or 10 feet, which when I was just trying to think of distance, I was like, I don't know, 5 or 10 feet, which he then said, isn't that awfully close to be parking behind a vehicle? Which then I actually thought about how far that distance is, and I was like, oh, I don't think I was that far. Like, I feel like I was closer to, like, almost like a car length away. But I don't know. It's all an estimate anyways, which, again, they objected to because it was irrelevant, they felt. And the judge even addressed later that there's nowhere in the law like how far away you have to stop behind somebody at a red light. Like, you can get right up on somebody's bumper, and as long as you don't hit their car, you're still within the limits of the law.
Sure.
And we'll probably come back to this court case a little bit later just because it gets referenced a lot. So I don't want to have to repeat too much.
Mm-hmm.
So then the officer gives his side of everything. And then after the prosecution is done, then it goes to the defense. So again, the judge, since he didn't have a lawyer, was like, I can't give you advice or I can't tell you what to do, but these are your options. You can give a statement if you want. Just be aware, if you give a statement, then they have the same opportunity that you had to cross-examine and ask questions. Ultimately, with his choices, he chose to plead the fifth. So, since the defense didn't give a statement when it comes to closing arguments, prosecution doesn't get to give one.
Okay.
So they just had him give his closing arguments, or closing statements, or whatever. And so he gave some statements, but kept kind of stopping, because he would go to state something, and then I think kind of realize that that's not the place where it should have been presented. It should have been during the defense's side of things. So he went through a few things, and it came to the time of ruling, and the judge just described to him, again, trying to lay everything out so that it's understandable to the best of her ability. She goes into how basically the job of the prosecution is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he's guilty of the crime that he is saying he wasn't guilty of. And so it was a ticket for careless driving is what was being fought. And so then she goes on to explain that the only evidence that she was given, her being the judge, was from the prosecution, which did point to him being guilty of careless driving. He did not give any evidence that he was not driving carelessly, so therefore she was forced to find him guilty.
Right.
So then they start talking about, what that all means, where he can go to pay the ticket and all this. And during their talking back and forth, he stated something about getting his license back. And apparently, from what I understand, when you go to court and you get a warrant put out, because you don't, well, I guess when you don't go to court and you get a warrant put out for that, I don't know if it's specific to traffic laws or if it's just anything in general, but you lose your license until that case is closed.
Okay. So
he had been without his license for about a month until we were able to get to that court case to get this all settled, which, we'll potentially address that here in a little bit also.
Okay.
So it's over. We're happy to be done with the court thing because, again, that's the fourth time I've had to rearrange stuff because the past 2 times I showed up, I had to get time off from work
Right.
in order to be there. So I'm glad that I don't have to deal with it anymore. Like, it's over and done with. In my opinion, it should have been over and done with on that day back in January.
Right.
And so I go back to just doing my normal thing, no big deal. And then a few weeks ago, I receive a letter from Mr. Brown.
Okay.
So I'm like, why am I getting a letter from Mr. Brown? Like, that's peculiar. So I open it to see what's inside. And there's a sticky note that was on the top.
Okay.
I just moved it into the envelope, so I still had it. But it says witness's copy.
Okay.
And so he sent a letter to the courts. Basically, the judge said that, if he felt that she made a judgment in error, he could appeal. So I think this letter is an attempt to appeal to the case. This is my assumption, but we'll get into the letter here in just a second to just read through everything that he feels about this whole thing.
Okay.
So that's the whole setup. Now we're going to get into the letter.
What this has all been building towards. This is December 12th is the date on this letter?
Date on the letter, yes. I think I got it like a week or so after the 12th.
Okay.
Just because of the way the mail worked. There's a lot of varying. The font's all the same, but it ranges from bold to all caps. There's quotes, there's parentheses. I'm going to try to hand gesture since you can't really see it, just so that way I can accurately portray the letter. So what I'll try to do is I'll just kind of throw this out here if it's bold, because that's, bold is kind of in your face. So in your face there. Of course, air quotes, we'll do parentheses, and then I'll raise my voice a little bit if it's all caps, because in my mind I always see all caps as yelling. It addresses the court case here at the top. The title of everything is in all caps. I'm not going to yell that just because I think titles are supposed to be. But it's demand, that's underlined. So we'll underline things also. Demand to set aside the void judgment. So it's bold and quoted. So the accused hereby reminds this municipal court judge of her sworn oath to uphold and defend both the U.S. federal Constitution and Colorado state constitutions. If indeed no such sworn oath exists, or in the event this judge refuses to comply therewithin, and thereby then the accused hereby demands this judge shall recuse herself from this case immediately, and also all future cases on the grounds that she is not legally qualified to be a judge. Well, in the parentheses there's a double exclamation mark.
It's pretty heavy.
Right. So, assuming we may proceed, the accused instructs this judge to A, disregard all arguments herein of which she will rule against, and B, to discontinue reading this document for consideration if/after the accused has made his point and a ruling in his favor has already been issued by this judge. So that's the start of it.
Okay.
So now we're on to point one. Point one is titled Constitutional Violations. In order to bring criminal, misdemeanor or felony charges against anyone, it must either be through an indictment by a grand jury or an information, sworn and verified criminal complaint filed in the courts by a victim under oath or affirmation with a legitimate tort, injury, or loss of property. I, the accused, protest that the procedures that were executed in this case clearly did not meet this constitutional requirement, of which there is no state limitations or restrictions. This case must be dismissed. That's point one.
Okay.
Any questions, comments, concerns so far?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
There is a very interesting variety of font styles going on here, though.
Yes, I'm leaving out anything that's italicized, but there's some italics thrown in here also. So I apologize for not fully representing the letter. I'm just trying to be as accurate as possible when reading this. So now we're on to point 2.
Okay.
Excuse me. So point 2 is titled Judicial and Prosecutor Misconduct. So I, the accused, personally witnessed the judge, the prosecutor, the responding officer, and the witness all obviously, visibly celebrating the guilty verdict of this judge immediately following the trial. I, the accused, hereby formally protest that consequently this cannot have been a fair trial in the grounds that this judge was obviously, undeniably biased throughout this trial as to the outcome of this trial. Indeed, with all due respect, I, the accused, hereby demand this judge be tasked to prove she does not have a financial interest in the outcome of this case on the simple, undeniable grounds that there is an obvious, undeniable, direct correlation between the number of cases she can somehow successfully rule the opposite party to somehow be guilty, and the more cases the prosecutor will file as a direct consequence, seeing that the guilty party similarly pays all the court fees. Consequently, by these indisputable facts, this is obviously not a fair/unbiased court. This undeniable cannot be a fair/unbiased judge. Further, I, the accused, demand to know whether the corporation of the city of Grand Junction is indeed filed as a for-profit corporation, in which case this not only strengthens this argument, indeed it renders this argument irrefutable. 3 exclamation marks. Consequently, I, the accused, demand this case be dismissed in its entirety. So that's section 2.
Jeez.
And I apologize when I'm reading through. Sometimes I don't get the punctuation correct, so sometimes I'm pausing where there's no pause. And
that's okay. I mean, there looks like there's a couple kind of typos and grammatical errors in there too. So.
And it happens. Like if you're writing a lot, even if you use spell check, it's not going to tell you if you missed your second half of your quotation.
Unless you proofread your letter like 3 times, it's really hard.
Even then, I know they always say to when you proofread, read it backwards because you're more likely to catch mistakes. Otherwise, when you read it forwards, you read what you want it to say, not necessarily what you actually wrote.
Right.
Which makes sense. Okay. So, on to section 3.
Okay.
This one is titled Fraud and Racketeering.
Ooh.
So, consequently, to number 2 above, all Welcome to Grand Junction signs are a farce. This is quoted and in parentheses, so I don't know how to do that, and bold. Misrepresentation and entrapment and literally fraud in the aptly revealed, admitted, disclosed, and demonstrated grounds that hapless travelers, drivers, and visitors are at serious risk of state-sanctioned, county-wide racketeering. See Exhibit A. There's exhibits at the back.
Okay.
Indeed, the entity, Craig Fisk Brown, in this case is a corporation, and indeed the fines imposed by this court have caused the price of goods or services purchased or sold in the business to be increased. Did we end parentheses? That didn't start.
Nope.
Okay. Consequently, I, the accused, hereby demand this case be dismissed in its entirety, and if not, then the practices and conduct of all other parties involved herein be ruled to be indistinguishable from that of a criminal conspiracy. Indeed, I, the accused, consider this to be a formal test of this judge's sworn neutrality. That was all underlined. So that's section 3.
It started off with a really interesting sentence up there. Welcome to Grand Junction signs are a farce.
I don't fully understand everything that's written here.
I'll say so far, especially with sections 2 and 3, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of cohesive, at least not very clear cohesion in these thoughts. It just seems to be a lot of anger.
It might be. I'm not sure. We've still got a little ways to go, so they may tie in a little bit later.
Is it clear that he personally wrote this himself, or did he have like a ghost writer, like a lawyer or something?
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I mean the return address on the envelope is from him.
Right.
But I don't know if he gave this to somebody to write out and then that he just made copies and sent them out.
Okay.
So I'm not sure on that.
All right. How old was this guy? What age range would you say? Middle age, younger?
I would say age is a hard thing to define. Late 40s to early 60s, somewhere in there.
So about middle aged.
Yeah.
Okay. Just curious. I didn't know if he was like 25 or
No. He appeared, to be not an old guy, but older than me by a few years at least. So now we're on to section 4.
Okay.
So this is additional rights violations and more fraud. So I, the accused, was never formally, properly informed of my constitutional right to have a jury trial. Indeed, any amount over $20, exclamation mark, question mark. I didn't know how to inflect my voice, but that indeed any amount over $20, exclamation mark, question mark.
What does this any amount over $20 have to do with?
I don't know if there's anything that involves a fine of more than that, you're allowed a trial by jury. I don't know how courts work.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's what he's relating it to.
Okay.
My understanding is that's not necessarily the case, but again, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
Sure.
Perhaps it would not have made any difference until the judge ruled the victim's compensation from my auto insurance was inadmissible. It's hard when it's underlined, quoted, and bold, and all caps. I'm trying to, again, portray it as accurately as I can. Your Honor, I submit recent rulings that juries will decide on matters of fact, and judges shall rule on matters of law is unconstitutional. Parentheses underline this whole thing. Shall we discuss treason? It is an undeniable fact that insurance companies raise their rates in direct proportion to accidents/disbursements, and I hereby challenge anyone to find 12 of my peers anywhere who would willingly agree to a needless raise in their insurance premiums. Which, I mean, I guess that's fair. That's not really how juries work, but
No.
if that's the challenge, I guess he wins that round.
Sure.
Anyways, consequently, I submit to this court that this law, that the victim's unjust contribution in the amount of 4 times the value of his vehicle be overruled or set aside. A, should this judge disagree, then I, the accused, hereby demand this case be dismissed in the grounds that this judge is hereby undeniably engaging in knowledgeable and willful insurance fraud and is consequently disqualified. B, further, this judge is similarly enabling the witness to engage in willful fraud against my insurance company and is again disqualified. C, once again, I, the accused, submit to this court that there is no victim in this case. Consequently, this case must be dismissed.
So, 4 times the value of his vehicle. Is he talking about the amount, the 1,800?
I believe so.
Which is $450. So he's claiming that your vehicle is worth $450, if that's what he's referring to.
Like $450 for a RAV4. I should look into that.
And what year was it?
I don't remember the exact. I want to say it was like a 95 or something. I mean, yeah, it was pretty old, but it did okay.
It ran okay, yeah.
Yeah, it got me from A to B.
Yeah.
So, but also again, that's not the amount that I got.
Right.
It was only the 700. That's another reason why I feel that wasn't passed along to him.
We looked up the estimated Kelley Blue Book value of...
It was a 97, by the way.
97 Toyota RAV4. And it estimated like... We put it on fair, which
Right.
is the lowest quality you can do on Kelley Blue Book. And it estimated like 271 to 570, something like that.
Something like that.
So
if we go based off of those numbers, and there's an assumption that, I'm getting 1,800 for it, I see where the numbers are coming from.
Sure.
So, just again, to be fair with all of this, I want to try to get both sides, make sure I'm seeing where everybody's at. Okay, so now we're on to point 5.
Right.
This one is titled, Witness Either Cause or Help Accident Occur.
And so
I'm the witness.
You're the witness, he's the victim, quote unquote.
He is the accused.
The accused.
That's how he keeps referencing himself in here.
So he's saying that you're not the victim and there is no victim.
That is correct.
Okay.
He did state in there that there is no victim, which I've been informed by many people. Like, one of the things he stated was, since insurance paid for the damages to my vehicle, I'm not a victim.
Okay.
Because I didn't have to pay anything, which, for starters, I lost a lot of time in this. A lot of time was wasted going to court and having to deal with, police reports and just all this stuff of going through trying to get my car fixed and everything. Second of all, people that I've talked to that I've mentioned that state that in this case, the insurance company becomes the victim because they are losing money.
Right.
So I'm just throwing that out there. Anyways, so Section 5, witness cause or either cause or helped accident occur. I, the accused, hereby submit to this court that regardless of whatever actually transpired at the time/scene of the accident, regardless of whom collided with whom, the witness desired this accident to occur for the very simple reason that he knew he could then blame I, the accused, for which he could then in turn fraudulently receive a nicer, newer vehicle at the expense of I, the accused's insurance. Indeed, I, the accused, hereby submit to this court that the witness's personal testimony shall be ruled inadmissible on the following grounds. A, when I, the accused, asked the witness, why didn't he sound his horn when he reportedly saw my reverse lights illuminate? His response was, I thought perhaps you were determining compass direction with your GPS, since you need to have a little for the GPS compass to work. Which, I'll say right now, that wasn't my response. I responded to the person I'm referring to as the DA when they asked me why he backed up at the red light. Yeah. That was my response to that. Yeah. He did ask me why I didn't sound my horn. And what I told him was that I assumed he was just going to back up a few feet to give that person on the sidewalk some room. Yeah. I assumed he wasn't just going to fully back into my car. By the time I realized that, a little too late. Anyways, Your Honor, I submit to this court as evidence by the witness's exact wording that he undeniably made an impossibly correct future forward reference on the subject of I, the accused, in regards to the subject of GPS, in light of his elsewhere contradictory statement that after I, the accused, had exited my vehicle, and only then could I have possible said anything to the witness regarding the subject of GPS. So he's just saying that that's...
He's confusing what you had said much later and put it in a place, and now saying that it's impossible that you would know that.
Which, if things had happened the way that he remembers them happening...
Then you're clairvoyant and...
Right.
Yeah.
And I can see where he's saying, like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's just, I've been there before, where you remember something happening...
Well, like you said, there's been a lot of...
Right.
It's been a whole year of things.
Well, this would have happened shortly before he wrote this letter. Because this happened in November.
Okay.
The part that he's referencing right now.
Yeah. Which is where you mentioned the GPS.
Well, that's where
Yeah.
he was there listening to that. And he's directly referencing the court case in this this statement. The nice thing with all of this is, since it was during the court case and everything's recorded.
Yeah.
So if they do need to look into it,
They can see who said what.
right, and at what time and everything. So, however. So, B, when I, the accused, asked the witness if his lights were on at the time of his accident, the witness smugly responded, yes. That's kind of true. I may have been a little smug with that. But when I asked the witness, how do you know your lights were on? The witness replied, because you told me it was dark. So in reference to that, what happened was, as he's doing his cross-examination, he asked if it was dark outside to start with. Or something along those lines.
What time did you say this was that the accident happened?
I don't remember the exact time. I think it was at like 5 something.
So it was getting to be evening.
Right. Which, I mean, it'd be close to around this time, so it's dark out.
Yeah.
So he asked me if it was dark. I said it was almost a year ago. I didn't remember specifically, but it was either getting dark or it was dark at the time. He then went on to say that he Googled when sunset was that day, and sunset was essentially an hour before the accident had occurred, whatever the timing was. It was close to about that time.
Okay.
That was when the person I referred to as the DA cut him off, objected because it was irrelevant. Then he moved on to asking me if my lights were on, where I could have sounded smug when I said yes. He asked how I knew. Well, he had just told me that at the time frame of the accident, it was dark out, as it is right now. And I know whenever it's dark out, I always have my lights on.
Right.
I monitor my odometer like a hawk, and it's in a shadowed area, so once the sun goes down, it's difficult to...
Well, yeah.
I mean, you can still see your speedometer and everything, but it's difficult to see. So I always have my lights on because it illuminates right there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I said, because you told me it was dark, that's what I was referring to. Right now, you just told me it was dark. I'm addressing that because this next part, which... Okay. This whole part, I'm not going to hear because this whole thing is underlined and in parentheses.
You'll just let us know when it's over.
I'm going to start parentheses, and when it's over, I'll end parentheses, just because I don't want to parenthesize the whole time. Really? Did the witness travel back in time from some future point after the time of this trial to the moment he got in his car just prior to the accident so he could then inform himself that the accused, a person with whom he'd soon collide, told him to inform himself that it was dark? Oh, sure, now the witness will say I merely reminded him that it was dark that evening at the time he left his home, so then logically he would have turned his lights on before driving. But let the record show this is most certainly not the response that the witness gave while he was under oath on the witness stand. !
Okay.
To start, if I could travel back in time, I would tell myself to take a different route home.
Yeah.
Not that it was dark. I don't know. So I'm not fully understanding most of that. But
Right.
again, I think it's kind of misunderstood. But he also addressed the fact that he just reminded me that at the time of the accident it was dark, and logically I would have my lights on when it was dark because I can't see my odometer. But I don't know. I think part of this may just be it almost feels rant-ish,
Yeah.
and so I'm not sure on that.
Seems like a little bit of confusion of the events and the information too.
And after a while things start to get kind of garbled together and stuff. So especially if you have a lot on your mind, and
He seems to have a lot on his mind.
right. He's lost his license for a while because he didn't show up. Had a warrant out. That's stressful and everything. So I'm not sure.
This has been just as much a part of his year as it has been yours.
Probably more so.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on. This is still Section 5. Your Honor, I submit that both of these responses from the witness are anything from the next three that I'm quoting are bold and underlined, but are anything from suspect to not credible to impossible. Consequently, I, the accused, hereby demand that all of this one sole witness's testimony hereby be ruled inadmissible. Also, I, the accused, hereby remind this judge and therefore request judicial notice that the responding officer did not personally witness whatever did or did not occur at the scene of the accident at the time of the accident. Consequently, any and all of this officer's testimony regarding fault in this accident is therefore inadmissible hearsay. I, the accused, hereby request judicial notice that there are no witnesses against I, the accused. Consequently, I, the accused, hereby demand this case be dismissed. The case is already over, so I think he's trying to appeal. May just be a misunderstanding of the terminology.
Right. Because really the only thing that everything's done for you, and all he has to do is just deal with the ticket, right?
As far as I know. But the judge did tell him that he had the right to appeal if he thought that she made an unfair judgment. Mm-hmm. So that may be what this is, more along the lines. I've had numerous times, even during this, where I've forgotten the specific terms that I was looking for. So that may just be what this is.
Okay.
As far as the officer not seeing things, that's not really the officer's job. I mean, they can still testify on what they found at the scene, the statements that they were given. Police officers are not judges. They do the best that they can to try to find out who is at fault at the time, and then if the people that are there disagree, they can take it before a judge, and the judge determines whether or not that person was at fault. Anyways, on to Section 6. This is labeled my statements. I, the accused, hereby protest that I was never given the opportunity to make a statement. This is all in parentheses. My apologies to this court if I miss any opportunities, such as if this offer was made under a different name or title, in which case I must retract the above statement and respectfully formally request this court's permission to do so now. If making a statement is synonymous with testifying, then my apologies again for my unfamiliarity with these proceedings, in which case I agree to testify, and I will plead the Fifth Amendment in advance to any and all further questions. I, the accused, hereby state for the record under oath that A, as anyone familiar with Toyota Land Cruisers will testify, These are an extremely heavy vehicle. Indeed, they drive just like truck. Sorry, I'm trying to read it exact.
Written. Yeah.
And sometimes we forget words, and so I'm just...
It's all good. It's just comedic.
Indeed, they shift just like a truck. I hereby testify that I respect my vehicle very much, and I also care for my vehicle very much. Consequently, it's impossible for me to swiftly... Sorry, that's not bold. It's all just... I'm just getting used to that now.
That's okay.
Those weren't bold. Swiftly jam my vehicle from forward drive to reverse drive. Indeed, I very carefully shift into neutral and wait fully 2 seconds for the automatic transmission to fully release its forward drive. Then I carefully shift into reverse gear and wait another 2 seconds for the reverse drive to engage before I very cautiously accelerate backwards. The resulting clunk each time I shift between... The start quote, resulting clunk each time I shift between forward, end quote, and reverse is always extremely disconcerting, and I do my utmost to not make it any worse. So we're ending the parentheses there. Consequently, in my opinion, Consequently, in my opinion, even if indeed I did drive into the vehicle behind me, again, the witness had ample time to react and respond accordingly. Again, in my opinion, whatever happened in this accident was solely because the witness wanted/wished for it to happen. B, I hereby testify that I did not drive into the vehicle behind me. Consequently, I, the accused, hereby submit to this court that it is hereby impossible for I, the accused, to be convicted of a crime if for no reason that in light of all of the above, the prosecution is hereby incapable of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that I, the accused, am guilty of any crime. Which I would just like to start out, earlier he said that my statement was just hearsay and therefore inadmissible.
Yeah.
Which, isn't that kind of all of this? How you take care of your car and how you drive?
Yeah.
Isn't that all just hearsay?
Yeah.
So, that is kind of inadmissible. Also, it was never something where I said I didn't have time to honk my horn. I assumed he was going to back up like a few feet.
Did he ever say why he was backing up?
The only thing I got was the GPS.
The GPS thing.
So to this day, I still don't fully know why.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm sitting in my car, watching this person over here. Reverse lights came up. I look forward, and I go, oh, probably, giving that guy some room. Starts to back up, and then bam! If right when reverse lights came on, I was like, don't you even try to give that guy room. Yeah, I would have honked my horn. But I assumed.
So was it like a full speed acceleration backwards almost? As if his foot slipped on the pedal or something?
It's been so long, I don't recall how quickly he got from where he was to where I was. But I do recall that it gave me a pretty good jolt.
Okay.
It wasn't just like he slowly inched back.
You didn't have time. You didn't have time to honk your horn to warn him.
By the time I realized that he wasn't just going a few feet backwards, and the time he hit me, I rarely even had time to register that.
It was too late.
It was just one of those, no, and then you get hit.
Okay.
All right, so now we're on to Section 7.
Barreling right along.
So this is more constitutional rights violations. So further, I, the accused, hereby formally accuse the responding officer of violating my constitutional right to remain silent. This is evident merely by the fact that I, the accused, was the party of whom the citation was issued, despite the fact that the responding police officer had not the foggiest clue what had in fact transpired at the scene/time of this accident. consequently citing me, aka I, the accused, was indeed, in fact, undeniably, oh, sorry, there's no ending to that parentheses, undeniably arbitrary. Now we start another parentheses. Okay, all of these we're starting, we're not finishing.
Inception.
So, and indeed, further purely opportunistic in light of paragraph 3 above. Starting another one. Again, I, the accused, challenge the validity of any citation issued to me under the color of authority that meets the legal definition of racketeering, which is defined a little bit later, and I believe racketeering has to involve some sort of like physical threat of harm.
Okay.
So it doesn't, because the officer never really said he was going to hurt him if he didn't or whatever. I think it's interesting. He said that his right to remain silent was violated because he was issued a citation. Again, kind of, I addressed it earlier. Police officers aren't judges. So they take the information that they have, and then they do their best to decide who's at fault. And if you feel that they made an error, that's what the courts are for. And so if they're given a testimony or a statement by somebody saying, this person did A, and then the person doesn't say that they didn't, and they give no reason to believe that that didn't happen, they have to give a citation in that instance. Then they have the opportunity to go before a judge and say, here is my side of the story. Which, during that time, he didn't give his side of the story either. So, that's where everything kind of came to a head on this. Second part of Section 7. Further, I, the accused, contend that this judge erred when I contended that the witness had indeed caused this accident. Regardless of what actually transpired, simply by his testimony that he admitted that he had carelessly stopped a mere few feet behind a truck, which we kind of addressed earlier.
Yeah.
The statement of the distance, I think I underestimated the distance that I was actually at. But as we got to also, you can park directly behind a vehicle. That's not illegal.
That happens all the time.
Yeah. Anyways, consequently, the judge's response was erroneous when she made her statement that the witness was not on trial here today. Well, pardon me, I guess, for not filing counter charges against the witness. For the record, I wasn't given this opportunity either. I don't think that's something where they're like, hey, do you want to do this? I think that's something you have to pursue.
Proactively.
Yeah, I think. Maybe I shouldn't mention that in case he ever watches this. Indeed, the witness could have just as easily been issued the citation had I, the accused's constitutional right to remain silent, been respected, upheld, and honored by this oath to defend / uphold / protect the Constitution, violating responding police officer.
Wow.
We end quote twice there. So I don't see how I could have been issued a citation. They're like, hey, so now I'm the police officer. Hey, you said that he backed into you. He's not saying anything, so you must be at fault. You careless driver. I don't see how that would work out. Again, I'm trying to see both sides, but on here, I don't. I think he might be misunderstanding how the right to remain silent is applied.
Yeah. Because you said that during the trial in court, he pleaded the fifth.
Right.
When he had a chance to speak, right?
Uh-huh.
So it seems really interesting that he's sort of ranting in this letter about not having the ability, constitutional rights violated, etc., not having the ability to speak when he seems to proactively not speak.
I
Unless I'm not clear on that.
I think this is again a misunderstanding of terminology. So I think when we hear that my right to remain silent was violated, like to me that means I was coerced into speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't given the opportunity to stay silent.
Right.
Where I think his is saying, like, it almost. I'm not saying this is where he's at. This is kind of how it feels. It's almost like he sees the right to remain silent as a get out of jail free card. Like, if I invoke my right to remain silent, you obviously can't charge me with anything because I have a constitutional right.
Uh-huh.
But that's not how that one works. That's
Right,
just, you have the right to not incriminate yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
But if other people still incriminate you, you can still be charged and all that.
Which is why when you described the way the trial went, this, and this, and then, guilty, etc., like that all made sense to me, like from a judicial standpoint.
And I mean, I get where the confusion may lie, because if you look into like legalese and stuff, it's not always written in a cohesive, easily to digest by just anybody means. They start throwing in language and stuff that you almost need to sit there with a thesaurus and a dictionary and Wikipedia and a lawyer and Google all together. Be like, what does this mean here? So
that might be where his misunderstanding of right to remain silent, plead the fifth is lying then.
Could be.
Because there seems to be some kind of discrepancy there.
Right.
It's not matching up.
So, moving on.
Yes.
Now we have Section 8. So, this one does not appear to be titled.
No.
This one just starts off. So, I, the accused, as properly identified at the trial, I am Craig Fisk Brown, as evidenced by my birth certificate. However, the entity, Craig Fisk Brown, a corporation, is the name of the entity on the Colorado driver's license and is also the same name of whom the citation was issued. I will state for the record, it is irrefutable extortion to hold a second entity, we're going to start parentheses right here, Craig Fisk Brown. I don't know who or what this is, but apparently there is some loose association. I will refer to this entity as my chauffeur, until someone has a better idea as to the nature and also the identity of this entity. Further, I just like stuff that rhymes, so the identity of this entity, I really like that. Anyways, further, since this entity, my chauffeur, aka Craig Fisk Brown, seems to inadvertently been dragged unwillingly into these proceedings, I, the accused, formally demand that I, the accused, be ruled to represent this entity, since I seem to be the best candidate for this action, in parentheses. Financially responsible for the misdeeds of a first individual. I don't know what that means. So, parentheses again, e.g., I, the accused, a.k.a. Craig Fisk Brown, in parentheses.
So
I don't... Go ahead.
Okay, so is he claiming that the name issued on the citation is not his name?
I don't know.
Because whenever he uses this chauffeur alias doppelganger or whatever it is, he does it in all caps. But when he refers to his own name, like at the beginning and at the end, it's all lowercase, but it's the exact same spelling.
So, I think they might, in like police stuff, whatever, they might just do all caps and everything.
Maybe.
So I don't know if it was titled on the citation in all caps.
Well, I mean, even like the police report you had, I think it was a lot of things were all caps on there when you pulled that up.
Could be.
So, but if he's, for someone who uses caps a lot, he seems to be complaining about, that's what it is, he seems to be complaining about all caps.
It could.
In a very peculiar way.
Well, let's do the second part of Section 8.
Okay, the chauffeur is still part of this.
Yes. So, consequently, in the words of the good judge, my chauffeur, a.k.a. Craig Fisk Brown, is not on trial here today, even though he's the one cited. Start parentheses. Will the court please explain to me when it was I, the accused, who was the entity properly identified by all of the witnesses, in parentheses. Consequently, if all else fails, I hereby request judicial notice that my chauffeur, a.k.a. Craig Fisk Brown, shall forever be held harmless by this and indeed all courts in the world. Consequently, I hereby demand that the Colorado driver's license and bank accounts of my chauffeur, a.k.a. Craig Fisk Brown, forever be immune from suspension, adverse points, extraneous DMV costs and fees, which result solely from court actions, also court fees and costs of every imaginable kind, etc., etc., etc. There's a period, so I have to long pause.
Gotcha.
Unless/until such time as the entity, my chauffeur, a.k.a. Craig Fisk Brown, start parentheses, whether himself or itself is first properly identified, and second, he/it is actually literally convicted of a crime. Consequently, under present circumstances, my chauffeur is fully entitled to both full restoration and full restitution, as was thoroughly delineated above in paragraph 2.
I didn't understand any of that.
I didn't really either. This part, I'll be completely honest, just I don't get it.
I mean, it seems to be like he's trying to point out some kind of discrepancy in paperwork or like something, like pointing out someone who doesn't exist, but I don't see where he's getting that from exactly.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or how that would even be relevant.
Well, and
Hearsay.
I mean, maybe. He also switches from kind of the stance of my chauffeur doesn't exist, so you can't charge them with a crime, and then turns around with, but give my chauffeur back his license. I don't think you can have your cake and eat it too, though. Like, you can't have a person not exist and not be charged with a crime, but also give them back stuff that they can't have ever actually owned because they didn't exist in the first place. Or if they do exist, then they are charged with a crime, and everything else is therefore irrelevant.
The only thing I can say is I hope the chauffeur doesn't make an appearance in Part 9.
I don't remember. We still have... sorry, we already did that page. I think Part 9 is the last part, but it's a long part.
Okay. And then just like random exhibit stuff.
Yes.
In the back.
Okay, so Part 9 also was not titled.
Okay.
So Part 9, incredulously, I was informed earlier that the actual literal Pope Francis of the Vatican has issued an edict by which, among other things, he has asserted authority over all U.S. courts. While I do not profess to have any expertise in matters such as these, it has been my understanding for some time, not that basically, fundamentally, any unrefuted assertion becomes law. Start parentheses. Kindly advise I, the accused, whether, I don't know if this is one or I, because he does I, double I, triple I, so I'm guessing that's one, but he used I's.
I'm thinking that's one, yeah.
Okay,
Lower case.
So we're talking about the Pope, so we might as well do Roman numerals.
Perfect.
Gotcha. Okay.
Keeping with the theme.
So start parentheses. Kindly advise I, the accused, whether, one, indeed Pope Francis, can't talk right now, indeed Pope Francis has issued said edict. 2, if so, whether any such edict has ever been formally refuted. 3, accordingly, whether the Pope's edict has become the new law of the land. In parentheses. I fully expect that this court and this judge is fully competent, capable, and indeed responsible to rule whether this entire matter shall be referred to the Vatican for Pope Francis's formal review. And if not, then why not? A. If yes, start parentheses, this matter shall be referred to Pope Francis, in parentheses. Then, by its own admission, this court is not qualified to rule in the matter regarding I, the accused, and the people of the corporation of the state of Colorado, aka the prosecutor, and the witness. Further, by its own admission, this court has usurped the authority of the Pope and I mean,
It's a great sentence. Usurping the authority of the Pope is a really good sentence.
I don't know if that's a sentence I've ever heard before. So
maybe in like the Da Vinci Code or something like
maybe that is a good sentence. So, and consequently, conducted an illegal and immoral trial, and then illegally impounded, extorted funds from the corporation of the entity Craig Fisk Brown, start parentheses, of which the Pope, by his edict, now claims to have control, or indeed has this court indeed previously issued a guilty ruling with penalties against Pope Francis himself. I don't know, you tell me. In parentheses.
We don't know either.
I don't. B. So that was A. Okay. Now we're on to B.
Wait, when did the number stop?
I think this is still part of 3.
Oh, okay. It's a subdivision, a subset?
I think.
So we're in 3B right now?
3B.
Okay.
3B or not 3B? That is the question. So, if no, then this court shall reconsider, in these matters on the strength of my representations, the facts of this case, and my arguments contained herein. However, please be advised that this document, with or without future rulings of this court, shall be forwarded to 1. the Vatican, 2. the United Nations, 3. the U.S. President and Congress, 4.
Wow. Sorry, keep going.
the Colorado State Government and Legislature, 5. the common people, and any all means of public distribution available to I, the accused, at present or future, but beginning with some of Colorado's major newspapers on the grounds that I, the accused, believe all of these matters are of public interest.
I like that all of these listed here could be qualified as like 3B3 and 3B4.
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of subsets going down.
What?
So is he saying that he's sending this letter to the Pope? He wants to toss this case to the Pope.
Well,
and the President and the Congress and
yes.
Okay.
I mean, somebody's bound to agree at some point, right? So if you send it to as many people as you can, then I mean, somebody's bound to listen.
Exactly.
Again, I'm not an expert.
Nor am I.
People in these positions may know more about this stuff than I do, and so that may be part of it as well. But he wants it distributed to everybody because it's public interest. So I'm just trying to help with that by getting the whole story
video,
out.
Yeah.
So that way you guys can kind of see this if you don't have access to any of these facilities. Mm-hmm. Side note. He's sending it to the Colorado State Government and Legislature. Yeah. Wouldn't that be wild if I got elected governor and then I get this letter and I'm like, again?
Which, by the way, he's running for governor. Spoilers.
Spoilers?
Yeah.
Is that a spoiler?
No.
Okay.
Maybe for this little video itself.
Well, it wasn't going to show up at the end. So.
No. I guess that's true.
It just shows up as like a campaign video at the very end. Anyways.
Yeah.
So now we're on to a different section, still in Part 9.
Okay.
In the event this case is dismissed, I, the accused, hereby further demand that full restitution be made to the accused, including all Colorado DMV costs and fees, and similarly all adverse points against said driving record. All court costs and fees, and also including a penalty and also a future deterrent for tort. Named 1, illegally and wrongfully extorting funds from a third innocent party. See paragraph X below. I'll see if we get to paragraph X.
Okay.
By ordering that someone post bond in an amount far in excess of that which is permitted by the constitutional rights of either I, the accused, or my chauffeur, or both. 2, the court administration clerk, start parentheses, of whom it is my wish that she herself personally be held harmless. Nevertheless, by her position and her authority, she either represents and speaks for this court, or she does not, in parentheses. By which said clerk either falsely represented to I, the accused, that the driving privileges of my chauffeur would be fully restored, or this court/judge illegally and irresponsibly reneged on its legal obligation to do so. By which, as I reportedly admonish in her ex parte communication, in parentheses, end quote, she was wrongfully subjugating both I, the accused, and my chauffeur to de facto house arrest. Consequently, on behalf of my chauffeur, I, the accused, hereby demand actual and punitive compensation in the amount of $1,000 per day, plus all related expenses for 1, public humiliation, intimidation, start parentheses, first properly not informing, or worse, falsely leading I, the accused, to believe his/his chauffeur's driving privileges were intact when indeed these most certainly were not, and/or effectively forcing I, the accused, to violate the law, and/or unexpectedly find alternate means for interstate travel for medically required out-of-state doctor visits at his own expense, and further to continue his return to Colorado after having been pulled over by out-of-state law enforcement, start parentheses, literally for the crime of, exceeding the speed limit by 5 miles per hour, in a state which also has some of the highest speed limits in the USA, exclamation mark, question mark. Inconvenience and actual damages as yet to be determined. I don't know what that all said really either.
Inconvenience and actual damage as yet to be determined.
Just the whole thing that I
Okay,
just
okay,
read.
okay.
Not just that last sentence, but
I feel like he's trying to ask the state to pay him for expenses of having his license taken away. Of all the days his license were taken away, have them give him $1,000 for each day. Is that what I'm trying to get at? Because it says that he had to leave the state for medical reasons, something.
Which,
see, whenever he brings up the chauffeur, I instantly assume he's talking about his driver's license because that's what it's always connected to.
right, makes sense. Well, I'm also trying to figure out at his own expense, and further to continue his return to Colorado after having been pulled over by out-of-state law enforcement, literally for the crime of exceeding the speed limit by 5 miles per hour in a state which also has some of the highest speed limits in the USA. Inconvenience and actual damages is yet to be determined. So, is he blaming the courts for him speeding and getting pulled over in Utah?
In Utah?
That's what I'm led to believe, because he states in a state which also has some of the highest speed limits in the USA. Utah, on the interstate, you can do 80.
I feel like he's just talking about Colorado. Because I know Colorado, we do 75.
Right.
And I know a lot of places only go up to 60.
Really?
Yeah. So he might be talking about Colorado. Because I think he's just talking about the backing up with the 5 miles per hour.
No, well, no.
Is it not?
So, see,
Is it because he still had Indiana plates? Maybe?
well, he wasn't pulled over by this officer. The officer for the accident called him back.
Okay.
He says to continue his return to Colorado after having been pulled over by out-of-state law enforcement, literally for the crime of exceeding the speed limit by 5 miles per hour, in a state which also has some of the highest speed limits in the USA.
So this is some unrelated incident to this whole.
That's what I'm led to believe. I also, again, I feel that this happened in Utah just because they have the 80 mile per hour speed limit.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I've driven to California a few times, and it's 75
There too.
the whole way, except through Utah, it's 80.
Okay.
I recall at one point stating one of my favorite things about Utah is they want you to get out of Utah just as quickly as you do, so they increase the speed limit. Anyways, so I'm not fully sure what that all.
I don't either. If that's the case, then yeah, I'm more confused.
Okay,
than I was before. So
2, needlessly, unnecessarily, and wrongfully subjecting the accused to additional public humiliation, literally right in this judge's courtroom immediately following this trial, which the accused further charge, by some standards, occurred during formal open court session. Further interest on this unconstitutionally overcharged posted bond. Indeed, had the accused served jail time, the accused would be demanding he be compensated in the amount of $10,000 per day. I don't know necessarily what that means either. So starting with 2. So there was public humiliation literally right in the judge's courtroom immediately following this trial.
So he was saying $1,000 per day before, and now he's saying $10,000.
That was had he served jail time. I think it's if he had to do, like, if he couldn't have made the bond.
Okay.
And he had to serve jail time, he'd be requesting $10,000 per day instead of $1,000 per day.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Either way, he's talking about something totally unrelated
to this careless driving ticket.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, he's rabbit trailed. Once he got onto the whole idea of the Pope, he's sort of gotten into a much larger philosophical idea.
Did kind of lose me there.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is still. I don't know about the getting pulled over in Utah. If that's what happened, that's unrelated.
Yeah, this is certainly unrelated.
But having to deal with like having to post bond and all that, that is still in association with this because it was associated to the court.
Okay.
Which
he brought it back around.
It's not necessarily the court's fault. I mean, if you don't show up for your court case, that's kind of on you, in my opinion, anyways. Anyways, let's finish up down here. So this is all in all caps. This first section is all quoted as well, so I'm not going to yell throughout this whole thing. So if this court cannot gracefully accept the truth, then it has no right whatsoever to even so much as ask, not even mention require, that the parties be required by oath to tell the truth prior to testifying. That's the first section.
Okay.
So if the court can't accept the truth, then they have no reason to ask people to tell the truth because they can't accept it? Is that?
I guess.
Okay.
I guess. It's as close as I can come to.
All right. The second part is just in all caps. In the event anything herein is deemed disrespectful, I offer my apologies in advance. However, if only a mere case of no one wishes to hear the truth, then this court and this judge must forever, first and foremost, be aware that this court is the entity that requires that the truth be told.
So I think he's saying that the court wants to hear the truth, and this is him telling them the truth.
Oh, okay.
I think.
So if he's being disrespectful, he apologizes. But he's stating facts and they get offended, that's not his fault because they want the truth.
I think that's what
Okay, that makes sense. I hereby affirm that all of the above is accurate, true, and correct to the best of my knowledge. I further affirm that a copy of the above has also been sent to all parties of record. And then in parentheses, rebuttals are welcome, as is a future court date if deemed absolutely necessary. And then he signed it, and it looks like he stabbed through on the end of his signature.
A little bit. Craig Fisk Brown, a.k.a. I, the accused.
But not
Not the chauffeur,
Not the
because that
chauffeur.
doesn't exist.
So now,
So what is this exhibit? Is there an exhibit B?
I think so.
Oh,
Yes.
we'll get to that in a moment.
Now we're on to the exhibits. So Exhibit A. First one is racketeering.
Yes.
So an organized conspiracy to commit the crimes of extortion or coercion, or attempts to commit extortion or coercion from the standpoint of extortion. It is the obtaining of money or property from another without his consent, induced by the wrongful use of force or fear. The fear which constitutes the legally necessary element in extortion is induced by oral or written threats to do an unlawful injury to the property of the threatened person by means of explosives, fire, or otherwise, or to kill, kidnap, or injure him or a relative of his or some of his family. See extortion. Sorry.
Copied and pasted
I
from the
believe so.
dictionary or whatever.
So I guess it's also activities of organized criminals who extort money from legitimate businesses by violence or other forms of threats or intimidation, or conduct of illegal enterprises such as gambling, narcotics traffic, or prostitution. Okay, so this is racketeering activity defined. So racketeering is demanding, soliciting, or receiving anything of value from the owner, proprietor, or other person having a financial interest in a business by means of either a threat, expressed or implied, or a promise, expressed or implied, that the person so demanding, soliciting, or receiving such thing of value will A. cause the competition of the person for whom the payment is demanded, solicited, or received to be diminished or eliminated, or B. cause the price of goods or services purchased or sold in the business to be increased, decreased, or maintained at a state level, or C. protect the property used in the business or the person or family of the owner, proprietor, or other interested person from injury by violence or other unlawful means. I don't think this necessarily applies.
I don't
Like
either.
where
Well, especially that, because there's that whole section of the letter where he talks about how, regardless of how the accident occurred, it was something that you allowed to happen and you sort of wanted it to happen.
wanted/wished for.
Wished for, yeah. So thinking, maybe I'll get a couple grand out of this to get a new car. Since that is false, presumably,
Right.
this whole racketeering, expounding on racketeering is really kind of pointless.
Well,
Because that's
I
not what you're
don't
doing.
think it's even in association of that. I think it's because of all of like the fine for the ticket
Okay, right.
and all of the court fees. I think that is the monetary
Okay.
expense that he's trying to define as being racketeered.
Okay. Which, I mean, in some way, taxes are
Well,
Right,
but
racketeering too,
even
right?
still, by this own definition, there has to be oral or written threats to do an unlawful injury to the property of the threatened person by means of explosives, fire, or otherwise, or to kill, kidnap, or injure him or a relative of his or some member of his family. So, like that, the way that I see this is racketeering is an officer coming up and being like, you got to pay this or else. Like, but, I mean, I guess I can see him considering jail time to be a threat. And, I mean, if you don't pay your fines, you go to jail.
Yeah.
So maybe that's kind of where he's coming from?
Maybe. But that's something wholly outside of this case. That's something he just needs to take up with the courts himself.
I think he's trying to address like 5 different things.
In one go.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's fair. I mean, who wants to go to court 5 different times? 5's just an arbitrary number I just came up with. I don't think there's actually 5 different issues here.
More like 9.
Anyways.
So that's that. Exhibit B.
Exhibit B.
So this looks like there's purple hyperlinks in here, which means that he visited these links. And it just looks like a copied article.
Yes.
Right?
This is from July 7th, 2017. Pope Francis makes a law, destroys every corporation in the world, releasing all the trust funds to humanity. And
Does it say where this article came from?
you know, I looked it up.
You did?
I looked this up because I wanted to know specifically what it is.
Yeah.
And this and like one other website are the only things that came up.
Okay.
So I believe this is where this article came from.
Okay. Interesting.
But it says that the Vatican created a world trust using the birth certificate to capture the value of each individual's future productive energy. Each state, province, and country in the fiat monetary system contributes to their people's productive energy value to this world trust identified by the SS, SIN, or EIN numbers, for example, maintained in the Vatican registry. Corporations worldwide, all individuals became corporate fictions through their birth certificate, are connected to the Vatican through law. Vatican to crown.
Sorry, is this where he gets the idea that he is a corporation?
Maybe.
Maybe. Everyone is a corporate fiction through their birth certificate?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Vatican to crown to bar to laws to judges to people, and through money, Vatican birth accounts value to IMF to Treasury, Federal Reserve, to banks, to people, loans, to judges, administration, and sheriff's confiscation. I also see where he gets the starting parentheses and not ending it, because that's in here also. Judges administer the birth trust account in court matters, favoring the court and the banks, acting as the presumed beneficiary since they have not properly advised the true beneficiary of their own trust. Judges, attorneys, bankers, lawmakers, law enforcement, and all public officials, public servants, are now held personally liable for their confiscation of the true beneficiaries' homes, cars, money, and assets, false imprisonment, deception, harassment, and conversion of the true beneficiaries' trust funds.
Did you understand any of that?
No.
What's really weird is how hyperbolic the article title is, because it says, what does it say? Pope Francis makes a law, destroys every corporation in the world.
Yeah.
Which is obviously, it's 2018. This has not happened. I don't quite know what this is about.
And that was the thing. Like when I looked it up, and 2 websites came up with information about it. Like if that was, like if this was the way it sounds, I feel like it would have been on like New York Times, maybe.
News, yeah. Definitely.
So I don't know. Also, I'm not sure about if you make a proclamation and it's not refuted, it becomes the law of the land. Because then, if so, I am the king of the world. Oh, Jack got it first.
Take it.
Oh, Titanic.
Darn you, Leo.
Nobody refuted that. I don't recall. Somebody's had to have, right?
Rose didn't say no.
No, you're not.
You're not.
Man. So then, this is just more about the Pope Francis thing. It's the importance of motu proprio by Pope Francis. I don't speak the language,
I assume this isn't the same article. This looks like it's something a little different.
Based on me looking this up, this is related to that.
Oh, okay.
So that the law is the motu proprio.
Okay.
Probably saying that wrong.
That's okay.
So, according to the New Advent Catholic Encyclopedia, motu proprio in Latin stands for of his own accord and is the name given to an official decree by a pope personally in his capacity and office as a supreme sovereign pontiff and not in his capacity as the
Apostolic.
Thank you, leader and teacher of the universal church. To put it more bluntly, motu proprio is the highest form of legal instrument on the planet in accordance with its province, influence, and structure to the Western Roman world, overriding anything that could be issued by the United Nations, the Inner and Middle Temple, the Crown of the Great Britain, or any other monarch, and indeed by any head of state or body politic. If you are a member of the United Nations or are recognized by the United States, the United Kingdom, or have a bank account anywhere on the planet, then a motu proprio is the highest legal instrument, no question. The motu proprio issued by Pope Francis on July 11th, 2013, is an instrument of several functions and layers. In the first instance, it may be legally constructed to apply to the local matters of the administration of the Holy See.
Don't know what that is.
I don't know what the Holy See is either.
SEE.
Right.
Not
The
even
Holy See.
Yeah.
In the second instance, the document relates to the fact that the Holy See is the underpinning of the whole global system of law. Therefore, anyone holding an office anywhere in the world is also subject to these limits, where immunity no longer applies. Thirdly, we see the Holy See and the Universal Church clearly separating itself from the nihilist world of the professional elite, who continue to be proven time and time again to be criminally insane, stark raving mad, and with no desire to do anything honorable until they are torn from power by anybody who cares for the law. I can see where they're coming with that. I mean, look at anybody in a position of power.
I'm confused as to what this motu proprio actually is and how it's implemented.
Well, we got two.
Does it explain here at the
I don't
bottom?
know. We have two
Okay,
paragraphs
okay.
left. Let's just get through those real quick. And
Okay.
then the age of the Roman cult has first formed in the 11th century that hijacked the Catholic Church, first formed by the Carolingians in the 8th century, then the Holy Christian Emperor or Byzantine Church by the 13th century, and the world at large by the 16th century, ceased to exist upon the election of Pope Francis circa March 14th, 2013. This document, issued by Pope Francis, is historic on multiple levels, but most significant above all others is that it recognizes the supremacy of the Golden Rule. Is that the do unto others as you would have them do?
I guess. I don't know.
Sorry. The same teaching ascribed to Jesus Christ and the intimate connection to the rule of law, that all are subject to the rule of law, no one is above the law.
Is that the end? Is there nothing on the back?
There's nothing on the back.
That is the end of the whole letter.
No, that's not this one. Oh, maybe it is. Because then at the bottom it says C, and then there's a hyperlink to the one that we just read.
Okay. And so the one that we just read came from Maine Republic Mail.
Is that it? Maine Republic Email Alert.
Maine Republic Email Alert. So it
Maine.
So it comes from Maine.
Maine Republic Email Alert.com.
Strange.
Seems to be up to date on the Vatican
Yeah.
and the Pope.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at right now.
Wow.
I just, like, the first good portion of the letter, I could kind of see where he was coming from and stuff. I'll admit, Section 9 lost me. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Well, I suppose I'll start by asking, what do you have any ideas of how to move forward from here? Are you just gonna sit back and like wait to see if anyone contacts you, or if this just dies down?
That's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't.
Because there's nothing you really like.
There's really nothing.
Compulsively need to do.
Right. As far as I know, everything's been settled, or he's just trying to get this this case dismissed. I mean, if you want my opinion, I don't think it will. I don't. I think there's a slight misunderstanding.
On a few different things.
On a few different things, and so I think this is the end. But I've thought that 3 other times, and I was wrong.
It's like Return of the King.
Yeah. Oh, it's over. Oh, now they're back at the village. Okay, now they're getting on a boat. Oh, well, now God.
Eventually you'll get back to the Shire.
Right.
It's okay. It seems like he didn't really like address you in any kind of like in any kind of way that needs to elicit a response from you. It sounds like this was a copy for you.
Right.
Not addressed to you per se, and it's mainly going to the courts.
Wait, the way it's kind of written, I believe it's designed to go specifically to the judge that ruled over the trial.
Yeah.
Because it refers to the judge as a female. Mm-hmm. So I think he had her in mind when he was writing that part of it. Okay. But then it's also designed to go to the Vatican, the president,
everybody, everyone in power,
the Governor Hickenlooper, Fox News, CNN. I don't know, and that's just the thing is I don't know when or where this will end. So I figured that this is kind of a good starting point. So if it gets like big and like it does go to the news and the news wants to see who the witnesses and what their side of things are, it's already out there. Also, I mean, if anybody happens to actually watch through this whole thing, if there's something that I miss, if you heard it and you understand more of like the legalese and stuff, I mean, feel free to let me know what I misunderstood or misinterpreted from the letter or anything else.
Or maybe what he misunderstood or misinterpreted.
Right. I do know years ago I was working loss prevention, and there was this one guy that we caught stealing, my partner and I at the time, and when talking to him, like when I was reading through Section 9 and beyond, I was kind of reminded of him because he was talking about how essentially in his idea, when you're born, the governments calculate about how much money you're going to spend in your life. Mm-hmm. And so they treat people kind of like stocks, where I don't know the specifics of how it works, but that was his whole thing, was that he disavowed the name on his birth certificate because that was a corporation by the entity, or no, it was an entity owned by the corporation of the United States of America.
Okay.
Because he saw it as more of like a business.
Okay.
And it was difficult because we had to get information from him on, name, birth, social security number, all of that. And, I don't remember what name he went by, but the name that he went by was his name. And when I was getting his actual name, I had to ask him what his alleged name was, because that's the name on the birth certificate he was given by the corporation of the United States of America, is what he was saying. And so then, I mean, it got easier to talk to him as things went on. So I'd just be like, what was your alleged birth date? What's your alleged social security number? And he had all the information. Like, he knew it all. He just wouldn't own it as his own.
There's got to be a term, kind of ism for that kind of thinking. It almost has like kind of like anarchic roots. It seems a little bit in terms of government.
There was I actually I've been listening to some podcasts from Rhett and Link, and I don't remember which one it was on, but they kind of addressed something similar, where it's the term that Rhett used was sovereign citizens,
Okay.
where it's kind of like he just boiled it down to, I think the way he described it was the laws apply to everybody else but me.
Right.
And there's been cases of similar people in the past where, like, there was one, I think it was even in Colorado, there was somebody that went to court and kept trying to get a mistrial because there was no jury of his peers, because everyone on the jury was a citizen of the state of Colorado,
Right.
and he was a citizen of Colorado State. And it was just using wording to try to game the system, essentially. But, I mean, that may be something more in-depth that he believes. I don't know. Anyways,
so is that about it?
I believe so. That's where things are at now. Bright side, if anything happens in the future, much shorter video, because we just have to address that.
Yeah. If anything juicy happens, we'll do a follow-up.
Do an update, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna do like timestamps in the description.
Okay.
So if you just want to see, I'll do like the accident, first trial, second trial, third trial, fourth trial, the letters, section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4.
Jump to 1 hour 35 minutes for the Pope to show up.
Does.
This just might be the end, and you never hear from this again.
I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't see any judge taking this seriously.
No.
But again, I am not a lawyer, and so
Right.
there may be more to it that I'm not saying.
From our point of view, it doesn't seem very cohesive. Like you said, it was kind of a little ranty and rambly and trying to do 5 things at once,
right?
Especially towards the end. So we'll see if they do take it as just a basic like appeal for the thing. Yeah, I would be optimistic about it.
Right, especially like a lot of the things that could potentially be used for an appeal can be taken out by like the recordings from the previous court case and everything.
Yeah.
Which I think, again, that might just be, you got a lot of stuff going on. I don't know what the medical issues that he had to go in for, but it might affect like timeline and memory or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to.
And if all that were to happen, it hopefully shouldn't be anything that involves you. Because if it's stuff where they can pull from those records and just, fix it for him, then, I mean, because you've given your piece.
Right. I thought things were done after I settled with the insurance company, and that was almost a year ago, and here I am. January
2018.
Yep.
So, yeah, I guess that's it. Like we said, we'll update if anything. Well, thank you for watching, everybody. This will probably end up being like a 2-hour plus video, but that's okay.
Thank you, the one person that made it all the way through this video, Alex.
For editing it. So I have to go and find all the spots where we burped or laughed or something.
Or we're looking stuff up.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. I mean, if I do like the rhyming scheme, the identity of the entity.
Yeah.
I like anything that rhymes. What was it? I was talking to somebody, they're a nurse at a prison. And so they were talking about prisoners that are transitioning.
Yeah.
And the term she used was transgendered offender.
Nice.
And I was like, that sounds like a superhero or something.
Yeah.
Or like a wrestler.
Yeah.
I'm the transgender offender. Which also reminded me of Futurama, when Bender was the gender bender.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So, thanks for watching me.
I'll probably watch through it too.
Yeah, we got to do the timestamps.
Yeah. I can skip around though. I know about what I talked about or about what I want to timestamp. So I can be like, am I talking about it yet? Nope. Okay. I'll skip forward an hour.
Good. All right. Well, thank you.